Welcome, Thomas. So Thomas is the managing director
Yeah.
and senior partner at Boston Consulting Group and the leader of the consumer practice in Europe. And he has 20 years of experience working with leading retailers and consumer good companies around the world. And the topic for today's session, which I'm really excited about and to hear more about, is the importance of customer experience in the convenience economy. So big welcome, Thomas, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Maria, and thanks for having me. And I look forward to the discussion and look forward to the questions and that. I speak a lot and I speak fast, but I'll try to do that so we have room for discussions at the end on that. And we'll try to elevate the discussion a bit away from some of the technology and enable us to also more why is this change happening and what's at stake for retailers. As Maria said, I spent 21 years at working with large retailers across segments across the world on this journey, from years ago when there was denial around the need for e-commerce and omnichannel to now sort of fully acknowledging that this is essential for survival and that. So I will start by trying to put the transformation that we're seeing in perspective, then come in and talk about what is needed in customer experience today end to end, and then talk a bit more about what's coming ahead and some of the things. So look at it. So if we move in and then just to put sort of a bit in perspective, and that I think we're standing in front, and it's always easy to say we're always standing in front of a big transformation, but a lot is happening, and it's not just unique to Sweden, but we will see a massive disruption of the retail landscape ahead of us. And to many extent, COVID-19 is not the beginning of that. It's not the end of that, but it is absolutely a catalyst for change. And so I think that's really, this idea of are we standing at some inflection point? And I think there are reasons to believe that. I usually call out 3 factors, but maybe soon I need to start talking about a fourth, and I'll come back to what is driving that. But if you look at what's the history around, what's the transformation that's happening, it's important to understand that retail has always evolved from what was most important in that. And in each sort of paradigm of retail, we have added new requirements what's in. It started around, way back in history around just getting distribution, a constant distribution availability of product. Then we came into a period of range and quality came in and price. This was the era of the hypermarkets when we saw that. We are now in the era of convenience. And we're moving into the area of experience and also further into, what we call purpose-driven consumptions, or, where societal value does that. And it's not to mean that it's a perfect linear thing where everyone is at the same stage, but this is sort of the transition that happens into retail. And a large part of our segments are still in this convenience phase. We still sort of have price, but price almost today is a given in most retail segments. There are full transparency on that. So that's no longer the differential. Now convenience in its broader term is a differentiating factor, and in the future experience will be so. And I think that's an important sort of mindset shift to have where we are coming. So why are we in this transition and what's happening now? Well, there are 3 drivers, and I said here maybe I need to add a fourth if we just take our microcosm of Swedish retail right now. So e-commerce, it's a global catalyst for this. It is on the supply and demand side, but even more so on the supply side. And what do I mean with that? Well, the customers are calling for this. They're calling for, we need to buy online because of requirements, restrictions, lockdown. But more importantly, on the demand side, every single retailer worldwide have realized that this is now fundamental, right? So many years ago, or not many years ago, sorry, before COVID, there were still retailers who were, should we invest? How much should we invest? How fast will the transition go? But now we have added tremendously capabilities, capacities, opportunities and services to serve the customer need, and that will remain post-COVID as well. We're standing in Sweden with an Amazon that entered last year, and we have not seen yet at all what Amazon will become. And I have a slide on that just to give sort of a magnitude of that. In near future, ICA will open the collaboration with Ocado, the big investment in the warehouse. Of course, that's a ICA-specific play or a food-specific play. But when Sweden's largest retailer engages all in omnichannel retail, that will change the behavior of our consumers as well, and also the expectations of what good looks like. The sophistication of the Ocado platform in terms of balancing demand and supply and sort of delivery and timing and all that will set a new norm for what people will expect and come in. The fourth one I talk about is maybe the opening of Costco that's coming, and let's see how much that will impact and what more dynamic it will add to that. But what all these are doing, it's shifting demand more and more online. Just on the Amazon point, we laugh a lot when they opened around all their bad translations and all these kind of things. It's very easy to underestimate Amazon. It is very dangerous to underestimate Amazon. This is just pure traffic data on Swedish websites. And with this graph, I don't mean to see that all the other players are declining. It is just the natural seasonality of retail that is much more busy in November, December. This is a low point. But if you look at the amount of traffic that Amazon's website is generating already in Sweden today, sort of 6-7 months in, we need to acknowledge that they will be a force to reckon with. We think they will take 5-10% of the total retail market in Sweden in some years to come. So what's happening as a consequence of this, and this is a very illustrative graph, but it's a very important one to think around, where are you in your segment? And then we'll start coming into the customer experience part around why this is so important. So as we hit an inflection point where online takes up, more and more consumers are researching, buying online. Where that end state will be will differ by category, but as we go through this phase of transition, suddenly the balance shifts from mainly driving experiences in store to a balance between driving experiences and working with consumers in both, and fighting for your presence, your right, in order to be visible to consumers. As the previous speaker just talked around, how do you even get to know how do you become present? And in this sort of middle phase, it is a fight for survival. We have seen many categories where the shakeout, whether it's consumer electronics, whether it's sports, other categories, where in this inflection point and this phase, it's a fight for who actually has a right to play in the future. And that is partly around, price and presence, but it's also very much around customer experience. The cost of failure is high. And this is the reality, maybe not quite so dramatic, but it does look a bit like Jensen outside Stockholm if you go to that shopping mall where there's, I think, one store open today. But it is, if you don't manage that transition in that period, then it's bankrupt, it's closure. And we see a lot of restructuring, bankruptcies, retailers leaving Sweden, only selling online going forward. So building customer experience becomes tremendously important, and to be part of this, to be relevant in this paradigm shift we're going through. All right, but it's not that easy. And if you look at it, and I used an international examples because I don't want to hang out any Swedish retailers, and that I don't think that's the point of this discussion. If you look at how customers are experienced, how good are retailers, traditional retailers, and also online retailers in building customer experience online, there is a huge discrepancy. And this is an example of food retail players across the world, really large established players. But how they build good omnichannel online customer experience is significantly different. And from the people who are doing extremely well, also seeing the benefit of that, on that side you will find more of the pure plays, more of the companies that come from an online first mentality. And then at the other end, you'll find many large traditional retailers who are really struggling with the transition and the mindset shift in order to, how do you build great customer experience online? And why is this so difficult? Well, it's important to realize you have management teams that have all grown up in an old model, right? Everyone who is at the top of a company have usually succeeded by sort of making their way up the traditional proven model. But when you look at what's needed, how do you build customer experience? How do you build personal interaction? How do you delight customers online? It is a fundamental different experience than it is in a physical environment. I'm not saying the others is unimportant. You need both in an omnichannel environment, but in order to succeed in delivering great customer experience, you need fundamental different capabilities. And this graph comes from something we call the Omnichannel Maturity Assessment, which is a way to sort of compare and also do a status of where people are. And if you look at what are the components that we look at in this, it really is around how do you delight the customers in the whole cycle, all the way from when they're looking for inspiration, when they're looking from, to orient themselves, when they go through the selection process, they go through transaction, there's a delivery phase, which can be in store or it can be at home, and there is sort of the whole customer care. And in all of those, there are new capabilities that are needed in order to make this happen. And that's those capabilities become incredibly important, and how do you nurture and build that? And it's also important that this is not something that just happens by itself. This, like the store experiences that many retailers have, is something that has been designed over years. And here as well, you need to design the customer experience that you want. What kind of customer experience do you want? Amazon has a very distinct customer experience, which is all about mass selection, right? It's not a very inspiring, it's not a very personal customer experience from that you feel sort of a lot of inspiration. It's mass retail, and then using algorithms to sort of try to find what's relevant. But then where Amazon absolutely excels is the ease of transaction, the ease of delivery, the ease of information, right? They're a platform infrastructure company that is incredibly efficient. Now, you might not choose to compete against that and might choose to focus on the inspiration, orientation, and selection phase and do that really well. But what is important is you need to find out, how do you want your customer to experience that? And how do you then build the data infrastructure, the technology, the capabilities to build that? But what we see many retailers lack is that they don't design the customer experience they're trying to do. And that's particularly true in the customer care, or the last step. When customers, we have a saying called the moments of truth. That is what happens when a customer has a problem. If you go to a store, you forget your wallet. Have you as a store decided how are you going to react and how are you going to treat that customer? The same is needed for offline, for online. What happens when the perfect flow doesn't happen? And it doesn't happen all the time. We all know that, right? The customer doesn't get the product, they don't get information, the packaging is broken, and there is a huge room to really delight customers by how you handle the sad flows, the bad flows, or whatever you call them, and don't just plan for everything to work out perfectly. I went through many online customer experiences during COVID in Sweden, where you buy products and the retailers are overwhelmed by dealing and handling customer reach out calls, complaints, and things that don't work out. And I think this is an incredibly important part if you want to delight customers. Amazon used to have 60% of people in the very beginning, and when they opened the bookstore, 60% of people that bought online called customer service. And obviously if you imagine the business today, they would have billions of people working in customer care. But what they realized, what they needed to excel was that delivery experience and that experience, and also offering customers self-help in order to change when things needs to be changed, and you don't have to call customer care. All those aspects are really important. And if you fail at those, you do it once, maybe the customer will come back. If you fail twice, you will not see that customer again. And I think that's an important mindset to have. But this is sort of, I would call the basics, but these are the things that you need to do. So if you think around, these are fundamentals, and then you need to design that journey, but this is not where it stops. If you look at like the frontier for what good looks like, so yes, having data on your customers and having that, there are new things coming in a continuous wave that we are seeing that will come. I would say in Sweden, the slide we showed before, this is where the focus needs to be in terms of creating a good basic customer experience that can deliver consistently and not disappoint customers. But if you then look at, where will you really delight customers in a positive way, there's a new frontier. And here you can look abroad, you can look international and start seeing what's coming our way. And I think sometimes it is easy to get a bit carried away by sort of the gadgetry. So this AR, VR shopping, those kind of things. I think, yes, you can experiment with them, but there are some really, really big movements that are coming our way in terms of that. And one of them I want to call out, which I do think is going to be a next frontier in shopping, particularly in more delight passionate categories, but it's the concept of social commerce. And so if you look as we move from price into our convenience economy, and then what's next after convenience, it is the experience. How will that pay out in an online environment? And a large part of that will be the combination of social media and commerce. And that can be either selling in your in social platforms, but more importantly also much more interactive shopping experiences where either you and your friends together go through shopping experience and can talk and communicate around that, whether you follow celebrities or influencers, how they shop and then you integrate the shopping experience directly into that. This sort of next wave of how do you build customer experience and that sort of that sense of belonging and affiliation that transactional e-commerce doesn't give you will become incredibly important. And again, often the US, China, South Korea, other areas are ahead of us in this, but I think we are beginning to see those come more and more our way as well. And I think that will be the next one. Online will be the next sort of really big topic, more so than people sitting with VR glasses around looking at that. I think the social aspect will be much more important. If you take that to a store environment and say what's happening in the stores, because I think what we'll see is that online, as you said, will diminish the need for stores, but stores will still play an incredibly important role in the future. Now that role will change as well. And in that experience phase, when we talk about experiential retail, that will also change. And it's going to be much more around sort of the rise of community and how do you build a store experience. So when I, as a consumer, choose to go to a store, how do I get reconfirmed in my love of the brand? How do I not just have a transactional experience, but how do I get reconfirmed in why I love this brand, the service I'm getting and that. And then in between, I might transact many times offline or online between the times I go to the store. But when I go to the store, I want to sort of be reconfirmed in the reasons I love that. And I think you see large retailers, but I also called out one of my favorite examples, which is very local to Stockholm, is Reference Audio and Söder. It's a very small, but it's this idea, this is not just for the giants, right? When you go into a store and like Reference Audio and you get fantastic service, the price is there, the convenience is there, but you also get to experience sort of the passion of consumer electronics in a different way than you honestly do in MediaMarkt and Elgiganten, and you get the same price. I think that is a truly differentiated customer experience, and hence I will always come back and buy there because that combination. But this is also where the large brands are really investing is how do they make their stores more of an experience, tailored to community, offering different service, not having the full range, the full selection. This is not about squeezing as much transaction you can. This is around building love of the brand. And I think this is going to be super exciting, and I think will be a very much more engaging kind of retail go in. And then you might end up transacting online at home afterwards, having browsed and looked and all that. So that's what's coming in experiential retail, I think, online and offline. And then if we just move, what's next? After that, I talked about like the next wave coming. I do think it's the topic of purpose-driven consumption. And yes, there are of course always retailers who are there today and brands that are supporting this, but it is not yet a mass movement. And consumers say that it is important to them, less so when you actually look at how consumers act, which is that people are still very price convenience driven, more so than they are societal impact, environment, equality, those kind of topics. But I do believe that's coming. Obviously, Sweden has played a great role in putting that on the map pre-COVID. And I think one of the, most exciting developments the last sort of 6-9 months as we at least begin imagining an post-COVID environment is that sustainability and purpose have made its room back into the boardrooms of large retailers and large corporations around the world. I was really honestly afraid that this would fall off the agenda because of COVID and it would all be around rebooting business. But it's fantastic to see that, I think environment and the sustainability impact will play a massive role in that. And there are many great examples of retailers who are experimenting to that. Simmons is, for those who don't know, I think most will know Patagonia, but Simmons is a Canadian women's apparel retailer who built very sustainable stores with geothermal heat and LED lighting and all that, and make it an integrated part of the brand. But we also see many of the large Swedish retailers beginning to really put sort of real sort of investments and that behind that. So that's what's coming next. So back to the curve, we are still in the convenience, and I think we have a way to go in order to, let's say, who will survive the shakeout that is happening. And I think that's important to acknowledge. Many categories will be around 20-30% online consumption today. I think for specialty retail, we will be going north of 50. And so a lot of stores will unfortunately need to close. But the stores that will remain will become much more engaging and inspiring. And that way you will have an omnichannel environment where you have engaging, great store experience with really good e-commerce omnichannel experiences that will come through. And I think that's a super exciting future. So I'm very excited about the years we have ahead of us, but there is some work to be done still. So with that, let me pause and stop. And please ask questions and disagree.